and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture we'll deal with the power-ups. So power up is basically the mushroom, star, and that basically give the power for our Mario. So let's go to this component and click a new Python file, name is powerup, and let's click OK and just import some of the module. So let me just copy this all of the module that will be exactly the same here. So let me paste here. So next thing what you can do is we'll just create the class that is with this powerup and just give here that is a pg.sprite.sprite, and let's define this class. This is the base class basically for all the powerup groups. So let's define the init first, that is the initializer, and let's give here x and y. So next thing what you can do here is just call this super and just give here powerup and self, and just call this parent init with this self. So next thing is defining the set of powerup. That means all the powerups will be defined here, and let me say powerup, and it will be self as a default parameter, x and y for our powerup, and name of a powerup either that is mushroom or a fire flower, and set of frames. Let me say set of frames. So let's define it first. This is the separate set of function that allows us to pass a different set of frames method depending upon what the powerup is. So depending on these names we can use this set of frames independently. So let's define it. First will be just initializing the sprite sheet. So let me create a new variable as in sprite sheet, and let's define it as setup. So we have now setup to just load this JFX, so that can be done by this JFX dictionary. Let's give a item and object, because we have mushroom and all the objects in this item object. It should be objects, because we have here in the resources. You can just check for these resources here and go to this basically in this graphics, and you can see here item, it is item objects. So you can see here the mushroom. So next thing is basically setting the frames, which is obviously initializes in list and frame index. Let me say the current frame index is 0, and we'll just now do something that is we'll just create the rect. First will be image. So first we have to create the image, and then we'll just create this rect. So first what we're gonna do is we'll just initialize the current frame with this index, that is self.frame index, and get the rect out of this image, that is with this rect, and should be self.image.getRect function. It should be get a rect with a small r. So next thing is just give the position for the center x, that is basically for the mushroom or the fire flower. So let me say rect. So center x should be x, and let me say self.rect.y should have y here, and the default state will be reveal state. That means I'll say state here, and this default state will be c.reveal. So just call this reveal from the constant class. So now what you can do is it's time to just set up the name here as a name, that is either a mushroom or a fire flower or anything other. So let's define this get image function. So instead of just defining, I can go here and just copy all of these, because it will be exactly the same. So let's copy it and just paste it here. That is defining this get image with this x and y, that's position and height and width to get the image. So we have done this pretty much in every function in every class, and it is very easy. So we have here a transformation, that is basically scaling with this size multiplier, which has been defined in this constant class. So what you can do next is we can now define another function is revealing function. So this revealing will self and args, that is here a packed arguments. So this is the action when power up leaves the coin box or the bricks. So revealing means there should be the revealing for the power ups, that is basically when it leaves the brick. So let me say self dot rect y, that is basically there will be the change in y. So let me give the velocity here for that. So that must be, that is basically our power up should now move with this y velocity. So next thing is basically assigning this y velocity. So let's define it here within y velocity. Let's give here y velocity is, let me say 1, and x velocity at 0. Self dot y velocity should be 1, and let me say self dot x velocity should be 0. So basically mushroom moves in the up to down, so there won't be x velocity initially. So now what you can do here is, in this revealing, now we'll check if it hits the bottom or not, and then we now have to slide this power up, that is we'll check for this bottom out of this rect, and if it is now greater or less than, lesser equal to, then self dot box height. Then what you're gonna do is we'll just say that is self dot rect dot bottom should be now self dot that should be box height. So let's define this box height to be y here, that is box height is y. This is the box, basically our coin box. So this will be our revealing. And what we can do here is, in this revealing, now we have to slide here. That means we'll make this y velocity to be O, and the state should be now sliding state, that is c dot slide. So this is the revealing. So next thing is we'll just define the sliding function, so it's to slide for our power up, and this is the action for when the power up slides along the ground. So that means we'll check for the direction and we'll assign the velocity. So if it is sliding, that means if self dot direction, and if it is direction right, then what you're gonna do is we'll just assign the velocity here, and that should be x velocity now because it is sliding in our ground. That means I'll say x velocity should be now 3, and what you can do else, if it is sliding in the left, then -3. It should be x velocity is -3. So basically x velocity or positive velocity at it right axis or at the right side, and negative velocity is at left side. So this for the sliding. Now what you can do is we can now check for our mushroom. So let's create this class here, that is mushroom class mushroom, and just pass here power up. That means we have inheritance here with the power up, and this is the power up that makes Mario become bigger, because when this mushroom is eaten by the Mario, then Mario must become bigger. So let's define the init first for this class, and that should take x, y, and name, which is obviously default is mushroom. So let's define this, let's pass it here, and in this init we'll just call this super with mushroom, and self as in current object. Just call this init of the super within just x and y here. So next thing is we'll just call this setup power up, and just pass here x and y name, that is obviously our mushroom, and self dot set of frames. It should be set of frames. So after this, let's define this set of frames. This is basically this set of frames, so it should be self dot set of frame. Yes, and let's define this outside here. So let's define this set of, it should be set of frames, and just give the self here. So this basically append our frame. So it should now frame, we have here frames dot append in our frame, that is with this image, that is our image, and this is basically the mushroom image. So we'll just call this get image here, that is our function of this parent class, which is a Powerup class. We'll just pass here x and y, that should be O and O, and 16 height and 16 width. So if you see in this item objects, so this position, this is basically our mushroom, which is at 0 and 0, and this is basically 16 height and 16 width. So this is our mushroom. So we have now extracted the mushroom. So next thing what you can do here is we'll now just define the handle state. So I'll say handle state here, that should be handle state, and just give the self here. So it should append now, that is self dot frames. So it is handle state. So in this handle state, it handles the behavior based on the state. That means if the state, that should be self dot state, if this state is reveal state, that means c dot reveal, then we'll just call this revealing function, that is our revealing function from this parent class. If our state, let me say elif our state is, let me say sliding, c dot sliding, then it should be slide, then what you're gonna do is we'll say self dot sliding. So just call this sliding method of our parent class, so it should be self dot. So this will be our Powerup, and in the next lecture we'll just work with this level 1.py. See you in the next.